Before 7, Phil, thanks so much for the weather update. Now, as mentioned in the news earlier, Parliament's inquiry into allegations of state capture at Eskom is starting today. The inquiry will look into many issues, including the awarding of over 11 billion rand of coal supply contracts at inflated prices to Gupta-owned Tegeta Exploration. Also, the 43 million rand contract with the Guptas media company, The New Age, payments of more than 400 million rand to Trillian Capital Partners for management consulting and advisory services, and allegations of impropriety against former acting CEO Matshela Koko. Also today, University of Cape Town academic Professor Anton Eberhard, who co-authored a report named Eskom Inquiry Reference Book, will be making a case to Parliament's Public Enterprises Committee regarding their findings on how governance rules were tweaked and then turned to allow for corrupt practices at the power utility. There is a lot to unpack here, there really is. It's a very complex issue. In studio with us, hopefully, to try and unravel some of this for us, Energy Analyst and Publisher Chris Yelland. Chris, thank you so much for being with us, and welcome to Morning Live.
Morning, thanks for having me.
This is going to be a very interesting page in our history, isn't it? But nonetheless, what are we expecting? First and foremost, do you think it's going to get off and underway today?
Well, it's had a rocky start for several months now. On again, off again, problems with funding, problems with appointment of a suitable person to lead evidence, qualified advocates, this sort of thing. So it's been a slow start.
Yeah.
Finally, today is the day. But I've learned just to believe it when I see it. We see these things get postponed time and again. Even, for example, Mr. Koko's disciplinary hearing, which was supposed to start, has been on again, off again,
yeah.
and it hasn't started due to various issues. So let's watch and wait and see, but whatever. I think you're absolutely right. It's going to be gripping viewing.
Yeah.
It's really important. It gets to the heart of the problem.
Yeah.
And I'll be watching very closely.
I'm sure you will. I mean, I'm sure you've been following the story. I think everybody's sort of been trying to follow the story because it is a very tangled story where a lot of people are involved, a lot of companies are involved, but most importantly, a lot of funds have been misused and redirected to people that don't necessarily deserve it, and that is a big issue for South Africans right now. What are you hoping to get out of this? What do you think is going to come out of the hearings?
Well, what I'm hoping is that we're going to actually start dealing with the problem, because up to now, from about 2012, there have been a series of reports, starting with the Deloitte's report into the load shedding of 2007, followed by an SIU investigation at that time, which was appointed by the President Zuma, after the Deloitte's report. And from there, a series of further reports and investigations into maladministration at Eskom, issues of coal procurement, leading up through to the load shedding of 2016. Unfortunately, through all of these investigations, most of them have not been made public. One of them has, and that's the Public Protector's report. Yeah. But even that has never been dealt with. The findings have been there. Many of these reports are in secret but have been leaked, and the findings of maladministration have been there, but they've never been dealt with. So just recently, we've had a PwC report into coal procurement issues, followed by a Treasury report, followed by a Denton's report, followed by a Cliff Decker-Hofmeyer report, and followed by the Oliver Wyman report. Then, of course, the minister's been talking about a further SIU investigation. And now, finally, we're building up to the parliamentary investigation, which I hope
is the crescendo.
Is the crescendo to all of this.
And hopefully the reports will actually wield something, and that some finality and some accountability will be held, because there's where the problem is that we get all these revelations, everything is coming out, and yet nobody is held accountable.
That's right. So this parliamentary investigation and hearings have got extraordinary powers of subpoena. They have lined up about 40 witnesses. And I think the SABC has seen the power of these parliamentary inquiries, which really dig deep, if there is the political will to dig deep.
Yeah.
It resulted in the case of the SABC of the abandonment of the entire board. And it could happen with Eskom. In fact, the board that we have at Eskom at the moment is severely depleted. And the minister is due to announce a new board in November, hopefully. But this parliamentary hearings could have a significant impact on the future board of Eskom, and I hope it does, because the maladministration and lack of governance has been astounding over something like 8 years.
Now, Eskom obviously needs to come to the party with all of this, and they need to be forthcoming with a lot of information. However, what we've been hearing is that the committee has resorted to extracting information from a lot of external sources as opposed to internally. Do you think this is going to be the case? Obviously, the committee they can call anybody into this the sitting, but the reality is that we actually don't know the names of who is going to be coming. But in terms of getting information out of Eskom, what do you think? How do you think that's working?
Well, I have no doubt that senior people, both within Eskom and who have departed from Eskom, can and should be subpoenaed. We know that the Gupta brothers are on the list. A number of the witnesses, in fact, all of them, are not publicly made available because of potential threats to them. And I think this gets to the heart of the problem.
Including the president's son.
Yes, there are serious threats to potential witnesses. So there is this approach. I do think that that the parliamentary hearings should call some of the key witnesses. I give you an example of one. Suzanne Daniels, formerly the head of legal at Eskom, has been recently suspended by Eskom as a result of her pending exposure and handling of the disciplinary hearing of Mr. Koko. She has access to documentation and the inner circle of Eskom as the legal person at Eskom. Unfortunately, there's always a problem with legal people. They have a kind of a misguided sense of morality. Because on the one day they're defending, for example, Mr. Molefe or Mr. Koko, and the next day they're prosecuting that person. So they don't have an idea of right and wrong, a clear idea. They will defend anybody who pays them. Yeah. And that is a problem, I'm afraid, with lawyers. But I do think that Suzanne Daniels is a key person that should be brought before the parliamentary hearings.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see who actually is called, because like you said, this list is not made public for the safety. Let's talk about the minister, because there were a lot of revelations that came out over the weekend. Minister Lynn Brown and the stories of reportedly denying any knowledge of her partner's activity within Eskom. This is large amounts of sums, her PA as well, two links to getting these deals that were a little bit not so clear. What is your take on all of this now?
For me, it's quite clear that Minister Brown is part of the problem and not part of the solution. It is inconceivable that the maladministration that has occurred under her watch is some kind of an accident, as she would put out. I mean, an example. The appointment of Mr. Koko as acting CEO took place by the minister at a time when there was heavy clouds hanging over Mr. Koko. He had lied publicly on carte blanche. Yeah. There was the whole Tegeta issue hanging over his head. There was the Oliver Wyman report hanging over his head. Number of very serious issues. And in the middle of this, he was appointed by the minister as the acting CEO, despite warnings from analysts, including myself, that perhaps it would be better to have somebody who didn't have these things hanging over her head, because Eskom had just been through the scandal of the Public Protector report, under which Mr. Molefe resigned in disgrace. To appoint another acting CEO with clouds hanging over their head was not wise. And events showed that within months, he had himself been suspended and is now subject to disciplinary hearing. Whether he is guilty or not is not the point. The point is that you need to appoint people that have got clean records and that don't have these things hanging over their head. Otherwise, you're in for another scandal and damage to the reputation of a state-owned enterprise.
Chris, one final question, because, and I think this will relate to, I mean, we can talk about all allegations of corruption and all of these things, state capture happening, but at the end of the day, all I really care about is the fact that I'm paying more and more for electricity. This may be happening, but my pocket is being hit due to possibly this, which I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I mean, now you've got Outer, one of the organizations, asking the energy regulator, NERSA, not to grant Eskom any tariff increases. Do they honestly deserve a tariff increase with everything that's hanging over it? Do South Africans need to pay more for corruption?
The role of the regulator is to look at Eskom's price application and strip out from it all things that are not prudently and efficiently incurred, all costs that are not prudently and efficiently incurred. This would include coal procurements. It would include, the billions of rands of additional costs which you referred to as a result of imprudent coal procurements. It would include the 1.6 billion rand paid to Trillian and McKinsey. It would include the Tegeta payments. It would include Mr. Molefi's bonus or departing golden handshake or whatever it was. All of these things have to be stripped out. Now, I asked Eskom categorically in writing whether they could give us an assurance that all of these things had been stripped out of their price application to Eskom. They would not do that in writing. So what they did say is that it is the regulator's role to strip out these costs, these imprudent costs, and I think that is disingenuous.
Amazing. Let's leave it there. Chris Yelland, this is going to be, as we both say, a very gripping period in our history, and I think many people going to be tuning in and watching. This is meant to get off today. That, of course, is the hearing, Parliament's inquiry into allegations of state capture at Eskom. Let's watch those events unfold. Chris Yelland talking to us here in Morning Live. He's an energy analyst and, of course, a publisher. Thank you very, very much for being with us here on the program. Let's take a break. We'll see you after this.